last night's show. Maybe not enough. Maybe enough. It's hard to say. A little bit this time because I was running this show for the first time in this new venue at this restaurant / bar, and the arrangement was that for my work I would be paid, or rather compensated, with food and alcohol. And then I arrived and the kitchen was closed, and that's it. And I'd arrived with a very empty stomach because I was hoping to have like a very nice meal, but all there was beer, which wouldn't have been so much of a problem unto itself, but also the owner had neglected to set up the sound system. And I don't know how to do that, and the girl behind the counter didn't know how to do that, and there was no sign outside advertising the show, and there were only 2 people in the room at that point. And it was just a little... Anyway, so, the girl behind the counter, she offered me a beer, and I accepted it. And it's not like it was a blackout night or anything like this. I don't recall saying goodbye to 2 of the comics. I don't know what happened to them. I remember saying goodbye to some others. We hugged. Perhaps the first 2 I mentioned left when I was hugging. It's possible. But basically, the owner really doesn't give a shit. And so we phoned him to help set up the sound system, and he starts speaking. Well, I guess it's his accent. He speaks in this very heavy East Indian accent, and his phone appears to be terrible. And he either doesn't understand this, or he chooses not to compensate for it. And so I'm standing in front of the sound system, and he's saying something into the phone, and I don't know what it is. And I don't want to be the one to tell him that you have, that in this part of the world, like even the girl behind the counter who knows him, she doesn't know what he's saying, and you have to. That's something you have to take care of. That's not my obligation, I feel. Anyway, you have to try to work in the world in which you live. Anyway, eventually some patron came in, and I asked him. I said, "Do you know how to do this?" And he said, "Yeah." And he set up the sound system, and then he also received a free beer. So which made sense. I guess the thing that bothered me though was, the thing that I liked actually, both. This comic walked in who was scheduled to be on the show, and he walked in with another comic, which is very uncomfortable because I know that this other comic wants to get on, but there's a show, right? And it's been arranged, just so. But I don't want to be rude to him, so what I thought was, what a nice thing. I went up, because the audience comes with an expectation of the advertised show, and I said 5 comics, and there's an expected time. And it was okay with me if he went on. So what I did was, I went up before the second last scheduled act, and I said, "Look, this other comic came into the room. I don't want to hold you here. I don't want you to feel obliged to stay, and it would be uncomfortable." It was a fairly intimate audience. I said, "So I'm going to ask you to vote when I come back after this comic if you want to see another one." And then everyone wanted to see him, which was great. So I didn't force it upon anyone, and they got to see some good comedy. So it's kind of a good night in that respect. But at the same time, the previous evening, a friend of mine, with whom I started out doing stand-up, she was on the Craig Ferguson show. But we do different things. Still.